Well, today is Reformation Day, when we think back to the Protestant Reformation of 1517. So I thought in honor of the Reformation today, I'd bring this large volume on the Protestant Reformation to you, and I would begin reading at page 1, and we'll end up at page 683, and it'll be a real challenge. We'll see who's still awake and who's still with us and who hasn't run off to the bathroom and run out the church. All right. But no, really, I have read this book. It's a fantastic book on the Reformation. It's written by Diarmuid MacCulloch. He's the Dean of Christian History at Oxford University. He's considered the leading historian on the Reformation. I find his history compelling and interesting, and so actually everything I relate to you today about the Reformation comes from him, and I'm hoping you'll find it interesting. Why should we talk about the Reformation? Why should we talk about boring 16th century European history? All right, well, the answer is because the Reformation for us Lutherans is like our Independence Day for our country. It's our creation story as a church, right? So, and what I often find is that oftentimes we start the whole story in the middle. When anybody talks about the Protestant Reformation, they start with this guy called Martin Luther. And he's walking up to the church doors in Wittenberg, right, on October 31st, 1517. Yes, that's Halloween. All right, he's walking up and he nails these 95 theses. That's what they say. Some people say that might have been a myth, all right? But he nails these 95 theses to the church doors that tells everybody what's wrong with the Catholic Church and all the problems he has with it. And then we're told, well, and then out of all that comes Catholics and Protestants, and everybody lived happily ever after. And the problem with that is you really missed out on the whole point of the Reformation, because you started the book in the middle and you don't understand why was Martin Luther's idea, which is that we are justification through faith, right? That we are saved, we receive God's grace, we receive God's love just by having faith in Jesus Christ. Why is this such a critical idea to who we are today? We can't understand how powerful that idea is unless you have an idea of how did people think prior to Martin Luther showing up. That's very important, all right? And so I want to first talk to you a little bit today about what is the Western Christian Church's most successful, most popular, and longest lasting church doctrine. Notice I say church, not scriptural, not a sacrament, a church doctrine, and that is the doctrine of purgatory. Now, as Protestants, when we think of purgatory, we're often like, oh, that's that thing, right, that they scam the peasants. They scam those dumb townsfolk with the concept of purgatory. All right? And we forget the fact that purgatory was in practice for 1,100 years, guys. It gets established in the 4th century, and it's not going to disappear until Martin Luther shows up in the early 16th century. That means people believed in that concept for 1,100 years. Why? Why did they believe in that? Well, we got to go back and think about how people live, right, all the way back in the 4th century. Okay, well, if you're living back then, it's not a very nice time to live. You don't have really a lot of control over your life. You probably live in a little hut with like 5 to 6 kids and your wife, okay? And the king owns the land, so you don't even own the land that you're farming. And you do a lot of manual labor. You got to go milk the cow and take care of the sheep, right? You're a victim to the weather. You're the victim to criminals that come around at night and steal your sheep. All right, life's tough. There's one bright spot in your life, though. That's the church. People like church. It's the day you get the rest. So you go to the church, and there's this guy called the priest. And as Protestants, I think we've done a really good job, and Hollywood's done a good job, as they always show in the movies, the priest is this like mafia crime boss. He's scamming all the peasants out of their money, and nobody likes them or likes him. It's false. Most of those priests were from the local region, and guess what? People liked their priest, and the priest liked them. He was trying to do a good job by them, but there was one problem. He's only partially literate, just like you're illiterate. Nobody can read. There's this myth that the priest always could read. Most of them couldn't. There weren't universities back then. So it's sort of like the blind are leading the blind. Everybody's trying to figure out this faith stuff, and nobody has a clue. All right? But you go to church every Sunday because church helps you answer a question. And that question is the question we all have about our lives. Where do I go after I die? What happens after I die? That's what you ask your priest. And the priest says, well, it's very simple. There's 2 options. You got heaven or you go to hell. And they say, well, which one do I want to go to? And of course, the priest would say, well, heaven is a really great place to go to, but hell is eternal damnation. And people would say, well, I want to go to heaven. How do I get there? And the priest says, well, wait, right? Heaven is only for good people. Hell is for sinners, all right? Notice how people are trying to make sense of very complex theological issues in a very tidy-minded fashion. That's going to set us up for a problem here. And the priest says, well, not so fast, right? There's this story called Genesis, and there's this person and gal named Adam and Eve, and they sort of doomed everybody to a life of sin. And the peasants are going, well, wait a minute. You're telling me then I'm a sinner. So sinners go to hell. So that's really frightening. I'm doomed to a life of sin, but I want to go to heaven. The priest says, well, God could take mercy on your soul. This was incredibly frightening to people. They were frightened because it meant they had to rely on their afterlife, on the mercy of God on their soul. Their life is already completely out of their control. And now they go to church and they learn it's even more out of my control. And so people are terrified. And so priests go, whoa, people are so scared. And they felt bad. There was an act of compassion here. Like, how do I teach these people that they could go to heaven? And so the church digs through the Bible and they find this book called 2 Maccabees. Don't even try and find it. The Protestants got rid of it, all right? And in it, there's a scriptural reference to this waiting room to heaven. Voila, purgatory, right? And purgatory works like this. It's sort of like being at the driver's licensing center along Queen Street. It's not a pleasant place to be. You're sitting there with unhappy people and unpleasant PennDOT workers. All right, so you want to get out of that place. You don't want to be in the waiting room, but in the waiting room to heaven, you do your time, so to speak. You do your penance. You're a sinner. You sit in purgatory for however long the church says, 10 million years, 10,000 years, maybe only a day if you're a really good guy. All right, but bottom line, there's an exit door, and you're getting to go to heaven. People love it. That is so important to understand that people buy into this program with lock, stock, and barrel. All right, they love it because it gives them a way to get to heaven. It makes sense in their head. And it gets more developed over time, right? People start saying, well, I got like 5,475 days on my purgatory time that I got to sit in the waiting room. Is there a way to pay forward on my balance, or so to speak? And the priest says, of course, right? Kevin, you got over 5,000 days that you got to sit in purgatory, all right? Kevin's like, well, how can I pay that off now? And the priest says, well, go out there and pick up trash along Burkholder. Make sure you wear your reflective vest. All right, so Kevin's out there every Saturday and he's picking up trash. And if he does it, the priest says, if he does it 15 times a day, goes out there every day for 15 times a day and picks up for 1 year, 15 times 365, that's 5,475 days. Voila, you got the golden ticket to heaven, Kevin. All right? Overnight, that's how you get salvation through Acts, which as Protestants we know is completely wrong. Okay, but why do people believe in it? Guys, it made sense. Not theological sense, not spiritual sense. It made sense here in our human minds, right? If I do good things, if I scratch your back, you do what? You scratch mine. So it's a way to be tidy-minded about very complex theological issues. If I help God out, he's going to want to help me out by getting me to heaven faster. So this is why Salvation Acts is so compelling to people, and why for 1,100 years, people believe in this stuff. By the early 16th century, purgatory is completely developed as a system of thought. We have now what I call the industrialization of prayer. This is when they create what are called chantries. I'm sure you heard that term. These are these buildings, sort of, it would have been a little building off to the side of the church. And the chantry is essentially a prayer factory where the church takes in money and they have somebody pray for you. Because Kevin's saying, well, I don't have time to go out every Saturday and pick up trash 15 times a day to get my time off purgatory. So here, I'll pay a monthly premium payment to the church. And in exchange, somebody prays for my soul and gets my purgatory time lessened. And you love that because that frees you up. You don't want to be out there almost getting run over on Burkholder, all right? People often, and there's a myth that somehow people didn't want to give their money to the church. Governments did not want to give their money to the church during the Protestant Reformation, but people willingly paid over money to the church because they believed in this doctrine of purgatory. I can't overemphasize that point. Think of your most firmly held conviction, guys, your most firmly held belief, and realized that's how people felt about purgatory. It made sense in their heads. It worked for them. The biggest myth I see, and he reinforces this in that book, is that people were unhappy with their church experience prior to Martin Luther showing up. They would have rated it 5 stars. They were very happy with church. They were very content with what their priest was telling them. They liked church, okay? It all made sense to them. They were very happy with this idea of purgatory. And now we get to this guy called Martin Luther. Now, there's some interesting things about Martin Luther. First off, I often hear that he was a priest. That's what people say. He was not a priest. He was a monk, and he was a university lecturer. Our founding father, as Lutherans, was a college professor. That's important. Why? He could read. And he had access to a lot of different philosophers of Christian thought. He had access to a lot of documents, historical documents. And he had read, specifically, he had read the epistles of Paul. And he also had read this guy called St. Augustine. And both of them say about the same thing. They say, hey, grace, love of God, and faith and salvation are given to you. You receive it unconditionally. You can't do anything about it. You just get it. And the other thing he says is there is only one sacrifice that needs to be made for our sins. And Jesus Christ already took one for the team, and he paid for our sins past, present, and future. No more sacrifices are needed. And so he's looking at what everybody's believing in. He's watching Kevin out there picking up trash on the road. He's watching Sylvia there saying Hail Marys 15 times a day to save her soul from purgatory. This guy, what is going on here? I truly don't think that Martin Luther realized the reaction he was going to get when he went up there and started saying the church is a scam. See, he had taught in a college. Anybody who's been in a college, you know that there in college, you're allowed to introduce dangerous, controversial ideas, and people sit around, sip coffee, and talk about it. He had never had a church congregation. He had never preached in front of a group of people who had literally given all their money to the church in the hope that it would take time off their waiting room time to heaven. He had never talked to a group of people who had firm convictions, firm faith in this system of purgatory. And so when he goes out there in 1517 and starts putting out all these writings and delivering sermons to people, and what he's essentially saying is church is a scam. It lied to you. It's cheating you. It's taking your money. This purgatory thing, this salvation by acts thing, it's all a load of junk. It's not true. And he's shocked by the reaction he gets. I think he thought that people would be like, oh, thank you, Dr. Luther. Tomorrow it'll be a new day. We no longer believe in purgatory. We'll just start afresh. We'll just get on with our lives. People felt understandable emotions, which were anger and frustration and fear and injustice and an intense sense of betrayal. The system I've trusted in for over 1,100 years, that my parents and my grandparents, my great-grandparents, that they all trusted in, has betrayed me. And anybody who's ever been betrayed, it's an intense, wounding feeling. And so people walk away from Martin Luther after he delivers his messages to them. They go home and they say, where's the pitchfork? Where's the torch? Where's the club? And we're going down, honey, to the church. And we're going to get even. That's what happens during the Protestant Reformation. This is the part we kind of leave out of the stories on it. They march to the church, and the first thing they do, and why they do this, it's just for whatever reason, we talked about the temper tantrums with the kids. The first thing they do, they throw rocks through the stained glass window. They smash every window in the church because they're angry. They feel cheated. And then they march into the doors and they rip out all the pews, and they knock down all the statues of the saints, and they carry out the big statue of the Virgin Mary, and they pile it on a big pile in the front yard, and they light it on fire, and they toss all the mass books on top. It's a temper tantrum. That's what it is. I'm angry. I'm fearful. Here's a new idea, and it's literally broken me. My most strongly held belief, my firm conviction that I can get to heaven by doing good things or paying money into the church it's like a bomb. It just exploded on people. And violence begets violence, and they say, where's that priest? Where's that abbot? Where's that monk? Where's those nuns? Where's that bishop? And if they find them, They put them on top of the pile and they light them on fire. If you read the Protestant Reformation, it goes on for 100 years. And guys, it's the most beautiful ideas of grace and salvation and love given to us unconditionally. And for me, it's a real paradox because it's destroyed by a story of human wickedness and just pure human stupidity. There, I said it. Right? We don't have excellent statistics or numbers on it, but we think about 17 to 20 million people lose their lives during the Protestant Reformation. 40% of the population in what is now Germany are wiped out. Because we're angry and we're fearful. And we feel betrayed and we feel cheated. And you know what? We throw a temper tantrum like a kid. Because our beliefs have now just done a 180. Martin Luther, for the rest of his life, he writes, he's just shocked by this. He can't believe the reaction he got. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Only he can answer that. But he's shocked by the reaction he gets. I'm not. I guess I'm just a realist, or maybe I'm a pessimist about human behavior. And I know you might argue, well, they were just illiterate peasants. They were uneducated. That's how they react. They grab pitchforks and torches and they burn down churches. But you know, guys, has anything really changed? I want you to think about January 6, 2021. And I'm going to take all the politics out of it, but I want you just to think about the actions and emotions of that day. It's eerily similar to the Protestant Reformation. An influential man stands up in front of a group of people and says, what? You've been scammed, you've been lied to, something has been stolen from you. The system you have trusted in for over 200 years has cheated you. Now, whether he's accurate or not accurate, you get to decide. That's your politics. Not what I'm driving at here. And the people who listened to him felt anger and resentment and frustration and a sense of betrayal, the same reaction those people had when they listened to Martin Luther in 1517. And what did they do? They marched down to a building that represented the system that had scammed them, or that they believed had scammed them. Again, that's your choice. Okay? During the Reformation, it was a church. On January 6th, it was the Capitol building. And you know what they did? The first thing they did, they pushed past the guards, and what did they do? Oh, they smashed the windows. Again, why we want to smash windows? Like the first thing we want to do when we're angry, throw a rock through a window. Just like they did during the Protestant Reformation, smashed beautiful stained glass windows in churches. And the second thing they did when they got inside the Capitol building, they went to Statuary Hall, and they knocked down all the statues. Just like we did during the Protestant Reformation with the statues of saints. Again, childlike impulse to throw something to the ground. Okay, and then when we're angry and mad, we embrace our inner pyro and our inner arsonist. We just want to light things on fire because we just want to watch it burn. And they try to take Zippo lighters and light the drapery on fire inside the Capitol building. Just like they burned churches to the ground during the Protestant Reformation. And then to top it all off, I guess there's just some childlike impulse to defecate and urinate on chairs and furniture. And we did that too on January 6th, and we did that during the Protestant Reformation. And I know some of you, why do you bring up such disgusting childlike behavior? And why? Because it's not childlike behavior, this is adult behavior. We don't grow up. When we're angry and frustrated and betrayed, and our most firmly held conviction has just been exploded, and our thinking is now doing a complete 180, we react in this terrible way as humans, in this really stupid way as humans. So I guess the morality and ethical tale of the Reformation for me, and what you can take away from all this, is how can you be firm in your faith, know what you believe it with your heart and soul, but you have an open door to allow new ideas to come in, and maybe, even reshape your thinking. And when it does reshape your thinking, when it challenges your value system and your belief systems, can you do that without anger, frustration, fear, resentment, betrayal? All those things that lead us to throw a temper tantrum? Probably easier said than done. Easier said than done. And guys, I think we all have to realize there's going to be another Reformation. There's been calls for Reformation in the 2,000 years of Christianity at every time period. There will be, maybe not in our lifetime, but a guy or a gal who's going to have a spirit-led idea like a Martin Luther. And they're going to stand up and they're going to tell us something. And it's quite possibly going to make your thinking do a complete 180. Your most closely held belief, your firmest conviction might get really challenged and changed, just like people did, back in 1517 with this 1100-year-old doctrine we call purgatory, that none of us would even consider thinking about ever again. How are you going to react to that? Are you going to be a pressure cooker that explodes? Or are you going to be able to incorporate that into your life? And I guess now I'm starting to think, especially after the day I had yesterday, that people say we're defined by our beliefs, we're defined by our value systems, we're defined by what we believe in our faith, that defines me as a person. I'm starting to get to a point where maybe, what defines us? How we react in response to our faith when it's challenged. When our closest held conviction and belief maybe is being changed, maybe being transformed, we're doing a 180 with our thinking. How do we react in that moment? Stress shows the character of us all, our true characters. And I'm more and more starting to realize that's who we truly are. Our reactions to our faith. Amen.